My name is Alicia Adkins, 32 years old. For most of my life, I believe love should feel calm. Not perfect, not grand, just safe. And for a long time, I thought I'd found that in Ethan Keller. He was 29, charming in that polished, ambitious way, the kind of man who could sell anything with a confident smile. He ran a small marketing firm he swore would redefine branding in America. I loved his vision, his energy, and his optimism. What I didn't realize was how often his confidence masked his insecurity. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months, with the wedding planned for next summer. That night, we sat at our favorite Italian restaurant, warm candlelight, low jazz, the kind of place where every table feels like its own little world. Outside, rain was falling in a steady hush, streaking the windows and making the city glow. I remember thinking, it's a good night to talk about the future. I was wrong. Ethan set down his glass of Chianti and leaned forward, his tone practiced. Alicia, there's something important we need to discuss. I smiled. That sounds serious. He cleared his throat, straightened his tie. I want a prenup. The words landed like a slap disguised as a handshake. I blinked. A prenup? Yeah, he said quickly, as if speed would soften it. It's not romantic, I know, but it's practical. I've worked too hard to risk everything if something goes wrong. My parents lost everything when they divorced, and I just can't end up like that. For a second, all I heard was the rain hitting the window. Then I set my fork down and said quietly, that makes sense. He seemed startled. You're not upset? Why would I be? I asked softly. You're protecting what's yours. That's smart. His shoulders relaxed instantly. He smiled, relieved. Exactly. I knew you'd understand. You always do. Inside, though, something small in me snapped. It wasn't anger, it was recognition. The quiet realization that this man I loved didn't really see me. He reached for my hand across the table. It's just, I have my firm, my condo, my investments. I've worked for everything I own. I can't gamble that away. I squeezed his hand back. Of course. But in the back of my mind, I was laughing silently. If only you knew. Because the truth is, Ethan had no idea who he was talking to. He thought I was a mid-level consultant who'd done well for herself, modest savings, maybe a retirement plan. What he didn't know was that 5 years ago, I created a simple inventory software for restaurants. It wasn't glamorous, but a major hospitality chain licensed it, and the royalties had been pouring in ever since. Then came rental properties, smart investments, and a quiet stock portfolio I managed on the side. Every month, I earned more than Ethan's company made in a quarter. And yet, I drove a 7-year-old sedan, lived in a quiet apartment, and wore clothes from local boutiques. Because I learned early that money doesn't just attract people, it exposes them. That night, as Ethan described his version of fair terms, separate property, no alimony, independent finances, I nodded, smiling faintly. I already have my lawyer drafting it, he said proudly. It's pretty simple. We each keep what we bring into the marriage. Should be ready next week. Sounds good, I said, sipping my wine. I'll have my lawyer look at it. He chuckled, the kind of patronizing laugh that crawls under your skin. You don't have a lawyer. I met his eyes. I'll get one. Ethan grinned, oblivious. That's my Alicia, always practical. I smiled back, but my voice turned calm, measured. You're right, I am practical. He spent the rest of dinner talking about how mature we were, how this would make us stronger, how modern couples handled money with transparency. He said the word transparency 3 times, and every time it stung a little more. Later that night, I drove home through the rain, headlights blurring on the wet streets. By the time I walked into my apartment, I'd already made up my mind. I picked up my phone and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. Tammy Lynn, my old college roommate. Back then, she was all caffeine and case files. Now, she was one of the sharpest family attorneys in Chicago. She answered on the second ring. Alicia Atkins, long time no hear. What's going on? I hesitated for a second, then said, how fast can you draft a prenup? There was a beat of silence, then a low laugh. Defensive or offensive? I smiled faintly. Let's call it educational. Give me the story, she said, already clicking her pen. My fiancé wants a prenup to protect his assets. And how bad is it? He doesn't know I could buy his firm twice over and still have money left to decorate it. Tammy whistled. Oof! So he thinks he's protecting himself from you? Exactly. Well then, she said with a grin I could hear through the phone. You're going to need Eleanor Chang. She's the best in the business. I'll connect you tomorrow. And Alicia, yeah? Don't sign anything. Let him walk right into his own reveal. I exhaled slowly, my lips curving into the first real smile of the night. Thanks, Tam. Anytime. And hey, she added, don't let him make you feel small for being smart. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the rain against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Ethan's face flashed in my mind. His confident grin, the way he'd said, I can't gamble my future on you. He thought he was being careful. He thought he was leading. I opened my laptop, typed a quick note to myself. If he wants protection, give him the full reflection. Then I closed the screen, turned off the lights, and lay back in bed. The storm outside had softened, but my mind hadn't. Because for the first time in our relationship, I wasn't just thinking about love. I was thinking about leverage. He said he didn't want to gamble his future on me. What he didn't know was I was the house. By the following week, Ethan was walking on air. He'd been dropping comments to friends and even to his mother about how mature we were being, how I understood business. Every time he said it, he looked proud, almost smug, like a man who'd just closed a deal. Meanwhile, I'd spent the last few days gathering everything: tax returns, contracts, software licensing reports, property deeds, investment statements. My printer sounded like a storm as I prepared the one thing Ethan never expected: full financial disclosure. When Tammy introduced me to Eleanor Chang, I instantly knew she was the right attorney. Late 40s, calm voice, eyes that could slice marble. She reviewed my financials in silence, flipping through the pages until she finally looked up and smirked. So your fiancé thinks you're after his money? I nodded. She laughed, a low, amused sound. Oh, this is going to be fun. Eleanor didn't waste words. Within 2 days, she'd drafted our counterproposal. Fair, balanced, clean. And with one special clause. Both parties agreed to provide complete financial disclosure before signing. She placed the papers in a neat folder, slid it across her desk to me, and said, "We'll let him come to the meeting confident. Then we'll show him who he's really negotiating with." I smiled faintly. You sound like you enjoy this. She tilted her head. I enjoy justice that comes with receipts. The day of the meeting, I arrived in a soft gray blazer and simple gold jewelry. No logos, no flash. My goal wasn't to impress. It was to disarm. Ethan, on the other hand, showed up like a walking advertisement for success. Navy suit, slicked hair, watch glinting like he wanted everyone to notice. His lawyer, Mr. Garrett, an older man with silver hair and a permanent scowl, greeted me with a handshake that felt more like a warning. Ethan gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "You look amazing," he whispered, confident as ever. Then he sat down across from me, elbows on the table, ready to win. Garrett cleared his throat and began. "Miss Adkins, thank you for coming. My client's terms are straightforward and generous. Both parties retain premarital assets, no alimony, and any property acquired jointly will be divided according to contribution. In the event of divorce, Mr. Keller will vacate the marital home within 30 days, regardless of ownership." I caught the last line and raised an eyebrow. Regardless of ownership? Ethan nodded. "It's just a formality." Eleanor, sitting beside me, leaned forward with a pleasant smile that made Garrett visibly uneasy. "We've reviewed your proposal. My client has a few modifications." Ethan rolled his eyes lightly. "Of course." Eleanor slid our folder across the table. "Our version is similar, but we've added something basic. Full financial disclosure from both parties before signing." Garrett smiled thinly. "That's standard. We're prepared." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out Ethan's financial documents, a few neatly clipped pages outlining his business valuation, condo equity, and savings. Eleanor nodded and handed over our file. "Excellent. Here's my client's." The moment Garrett opened it, I saw the color drain from his face. His eyes flicked over the pages faster, and his expression shifted from polite confidence to stunned disbelief. Ethan frowned. "What?" Garrett hesitated. Perhaps we should take a short recess." "No," Ethan said sharply. "What's going on?" Garrett cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and slid the folder toward him. "You should read this." Ethan flipped it open and froze. There it was. The software licensing contracts, the property deeds, the investment portfolio, the account statements, everything meticulously documented, certified, and verified. He flipped another page, then another. This can't be right," he said quietly. "It's accurate," Eleanor replied calmly. "We've verified all of it." Ethan's voice cracked slightly. You've got 4 rental properties? And you're pulling, he scanned again, eyes wide, almost $50,000 a month from licensing? I folded my hands neatly. That's before dividends. Garrett looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. Perhaps we should. Ethan cut him off. Why didn't you tell me? You never asked. He blinked. Alicia, that's not fair. I thought we were transparent with each other. Eleanor smiled, the kind of smile only a lawyer can manage in the middle of someone's meltdown. That's why we're here, Mr. Keller, for transparency. Ethan turned to me, his confidence unraveling. You let me think I was the successful one. I held his gaze. I didn't let you. You decided that. He stared at me for a long time, chest rising and falling too fast. You sold a company? Technically licensed. I prefer residuals to one-time payoffs. Eleanor added smoothly. Her portfolio also includes equity in 3 startups and early investments in renewable tech. She's done quite well. Garrett coughed into his fist, flustered. Perhaps we can adjust. Ethan pushed back his chair, the legs scraping against the floor. Unbelievable. You made me look like an idiot. I stayed seated, calm. You did that yourself. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. All this time I was trying to protect you from... From what? I interrupted quietly. A threat that never existed? He turned sharply. No, from risk. Marriage is supposed to be a partnership. It can be, I said softly, but you came to it like a competition. The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that hums with all the things people wish they hadn't said. Garrett finally broke it. Maybe we should reconvene after... No, Ethan snapped. His face was flushed, pride bruised. We're done for today. He grabbed his documents, muttered something to his lawyer, and stormed out. When the door closed, Eleanor leaned back in her chair and said dryly, Well, that went better than expected. I let out a shaky breath. You think so? Oh, yes, she said, amused. He just learned you're not the pawn. You're the board. That night, Ethan's mother called. Her tone was clipped and icy. Alicia, what did you do to my son? I pressed the phone to my ear, calm. I showed him the truth. You humiliated him in front of his lawyer. He said you blindsided him. Judith, I said gently, he brought me a prenup because he thought I was a risk. I just clarified his misunderstanding. She huffed. He was trying to be responsible. I know, I said, and I was trying to be honest. Silence. Then she said, You should have told him sooner. Maybe, I whispered, but would he have listened? When the call ended, I stood by my window again, the city lights blurring into gold. For the first time, I didn't feel small. He wanted protection from loss. What he didn't expect was to lose his narrative. The next 48 hours were chaos. Not loud chaos, but the kind that seeps into every text, every call, every silence. Ethan went through what I can only describe as emotional stages: denial, anger, confusion, and something close to desperation. At first came the anger. You lied to me. You made me look like a fool. Everyone thinks I'm marrying for money now. Then came the confusion. Why would you hide this? Were you testing me? Is this some kind of game? And finally, the bargaining. We can just pretend none of this happened. Let's keep things simple. No one has to know. That last message came around midnight, followed by a single line. Can I come over? I should have said no, but part of me still wanted to see the man I fell in love with, not the one terrified of losing face. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, drenched from rain, his hair a mess, eyes restless. He wasn't holding flowers or an apology, just a cup of cold coffee from the corner cafe. He walked in without asking. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. About what? He sighed, pacing. Look, this whole thing got blown out of proportion. You're rich. Okay, that doesn't change anything, but it doesn't have to define us. I stayed silent, letting him circle the room like a caged thought. Finally, he stopped by my bookshelf, staring at a photo of us on our first trip together. Nobody has to know about your money, he said. We can keep the prenup the way it is. Separate everything. You protect your assets, I protect mine, but let's not tell anyone how much you actually have. I blinked. You want me to hide it? He turned, frustrated. It's not hiding, it's just keeping things normal. My clients, my friends, they already see me as successful. If they find out my fiancé is worth millions, what does that make me look like? I laughed softly, though it wasn't amusement. Honest? His jaw tightened. Don't do that. Do what? Make me sound shallow. Ethan, I said carefully, you're asking me to lie. You're asking me to pretend to be smaller so you can keep feeling bigger. He looked away, his reflection caught in the window glass. You don't understand what it's like to build something from nothing, to be seen as... I cut him off, my tone still calm. You think I don't know what that's like? You think I was born with a trust fund? I worked 3 jobs to keep my first company alive, Ethan. I built everything you saw on those papers from scratch. He turned toward me, his voice cracking. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want it to matter, I said quietly. I thought if we ever talked about money, it would be about what we could build together, not what we're protecting from each other. He ran both hands through his hair. This isn't fair. No, I said, my voice trembling slightly now. It isn't, but not for the reason you think. He exhaled sharply, as if the air in the room was too heavy. You're making me sound like a bad guy. I looked at him, really looked. The man who once held my hand like I was his equal now stood in front of me, like I was a mirror he couldn't bear to face. You're not a bad guy, I said softly. You're just afraid. But pride doesn't protect you, Ethan. It isolates you. For a moment, he said nothing, just stood there, staring out at the rain. Then he whispered, almost to himself, I thought I was the strong one. I took a step closer. Maybe we both thought wrong. He turned back toward me, eyes glossy. Can't we just go back to before all this? Before. The word hung between us like a ghost. No, I said gently, because before was a lie, one we both lived in. You thought I needed you. I thought you'd love me without needing to win. He swallowed hard. So that's it? I smiled sadly. That's the truth. He stared at me a long moment, then nodded stiffly. I need time to think. Take all the time you need. He left without looking back. The rain had stopped, but the street outside was still glistening, reflecting the city lights like a broken mirror. The next day, Judith called again. Her voice was sharper now, polished with practiced indignation. Alicia, my son is devastated. He's humiliated. You've made this entire engagement a spectacle. I rubbed my temple. I haven't spoken to anyone, Judith. Well, people talk, she said coldly. And right now, they're saying my son's fiancé trapped him. Trapped him? By existing? You know what I mean. You let him think he was marrying down, and now everyone knows you're the one with money. It looks manipulative. I inhaled slowly. He was the one who wanted a prenup. I just agreed, honestly. You could have told him sooner, she insisted. Maybe, I admitted. But if the truth shakes the relationship, maybe it wasn't strong enough to begin with. There was silence, then a clipped, "You always have an answer, don't you?" before she hung up. I sat there for a long time after the call, just staring at my reflection in the black screen of my laptop. For years, I'd lived quietly, never needing to prove myself to anyone. But that calm had come with a cost. It made people underestimate me. And Ethan, he'd fallen in love with that version of me, the manageable one, the woman who didn't outshine him. Now that version was gone. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city hummed below, alive and indifferent. I thought about love, about how easy it is to confuse admiration with validation. Ethan wanted a partner who made him feel proud, not one who challenged his ego. And maybe, deep down, I had wanted to believe that if I stayed small enough, quiet enough, love would feel safe. But love built on imbalance is just fear in disguise. I closed my eyes and whispered to the empty room. If he loved me, he'd have stayed curious. Then I picked up my phone, typed one last message, and didn't send it. If you can only love me when you're taller, then maybe I was never meant to stand beside you. I deleted it instead. Some truths don't need an audience. The following Friday evening, Ethan texted me a strange message. Can you come by Nathan's place tonight? We just want to clear the air. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. We? Yeah, just me, Nathan, Chris, and Ryan. Nothing formal, just a talk. Nothing formal, that was the first lie. When I arrived at Nathan's apartment, the air smelled like expensive whiskey and nervous tension. The 3 of them sat around the living room like a jury. Ethan stood by the bar, pretending to be casual, but his jaw was set too tightly. Nathan gestured toward an empty chair. Alicia, glad you could come. I sat down slowly. What's this about? Chris, the blunt one, leaned forward. We're worried about Ethan. The whole prenup thing. It's gotten messy. Ryan added, Yeah, he's been under a lot of stress. Everyone's talking and, well, there's some confusion about what really happened. I crossed my legs, calm. Confusion? Ethan's voice came next. Tight, defensive. They think you might have done this on purpose. I turned to him, eyebrows raised. Done what on purpose? He avoided my eyes. Made me look small. I told them you blindsided me with all that financial stuff. Nathan nodded, like a disappointed uncle. You have to admit, Alicia, it's kind of strange. You never mentioned any of that before. Then suddenly, Boom. You're wealthier than him, and he's left looking like an idiot. I smiled faintly. So you're saying I should have disclosed my financials before he demanded I sign a contract protecting his? Chris frowned. It's not that simple. Actually, I said, it is. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Look, we get it. You're successful, but pretending to be the modest girlfriend just to flip the tables later? That's kind of manipulative. For a moment, the room was utterly silent, except for the slow ticking of the wall clock. Then I laughed softly. You think I pretended to be modest? Chris shrugged. You must have known how it would make him look. I reached into my bag, pulled out a folder, and placed it gently on the table. Since everyone here seems interested in my finances, let's go over them together, shall we? Ethan's eyes widened. Alicia, don't. But I already had my phone open, showing verified documents, bank statements, property records. Here's the truth, I said evenly. Every figure, every source of income. Nothing exaggerated, nothing fake. The three men leaned closer. Nathan blinked. Holy... Chris muttered under his breath. She's not kidding. Ryan stared at Ethan. Dude. Ethan's face flushed bright red. See? This is exactly what I meant. You didn't have to prove anything. Didn't I? I asked. You're the one who called this meeting. You wanted witnesses to your humiliation. I'm just providing context. He slammed his glass down. You love this, don't you? Making me feel small. I stood slowly, meeting his glare with composure. No, Ethan. I didn't make you small. I just stopped pretending you were taller. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ryan looked between us awkwardly. Okay, let's all just... But then Chris, never one to filter his thoughts, blurted, If she's this rich, Ethan, why does she even want to marry you? The silence that followed was brutal. Ethan's head snapped toward him. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Chris stammered. I just meant like she could have anyone. So I'm not good enough? Ethan snapped. Nathan tried to smooth things over. That's not what he's saying. Yes, it is, Ethan barked. He turned back to me, his voice cracking. You see what you've done? You've turned me into a joke. They think I'm some charity case. I took a breath. Ethan, I didn't do anything but tell the truth. If that truth threatens your ego, that's not my fault. He laughed bitterly. Ego? That's rich coming from you. I tilted my head. Apparently everything about me is. The comment slipped out sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret it. Ethan glared at me, shaking his head. You're cruel. No, I said softly. I'm done. He took a step closer. You think you're better than me? I think you stopped seeing me a long time ago. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The space between us electric, painful, final. Then, quietly, I added, You wanted a prenup because you didn't trust me. Maybe now you see why I couldn't trust you either. He turned away, muttering something I couldn't quite catch. Nathan cleared his throat. Maybe it's best if we end this here. I nodded, gathering my things. Agreed. Before leaving, I looked at Ethan one last time. His pride had always been a fortress, and I had finally stopped knocking on its gates. You wanted transparency, I said softly. Now you have it. Congratulations. Then I walked out into the cool night air. The city buzzed below, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement. I didn't cry. I didn't even tremble. Because for the first time since this all began, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. When I got home, I poured a glass of water and stared out my window. Below, a couple crossed the street hand in hand, laughing under a shared umbrella. I thought about Ethan's words, You've made me look small. Maybe love isn't about avoiding that feeling. Maybe it's about finding someone who doesn't need to look taller just to feel equal. I turned off the lights and whispered to the quiet room, Let him have his pride. I'll keep my peace. 3 weeks later, the silence between Ethan and me had hardened into something permanent. He hadn't called. I hadn't reached out. The wedding venue had already been reserved, the deposits paid, and the invitations designed. But none of that mattered anymore. Pride had killed what love couldn't save. It started with whispers. His friends stopped mentioning me at gatherings. Clients from his firm unfollowed me on social media. Judith, his mother, tried to clean up the mess by rewriting the story. Suddenly, I was the cold, calculating woman who trapped her son with manipulation and secrets. One morning, she called again, her tone honeyed with false concern. Alicia, dear, I think we should talk. I sighed, sipping my coffee. About what? Ethan's reputation, she said smoothly. You've embarrassed him, unintentionally, I'm sure. People are talking. It would mean a lot if you could just keep things private. Private? I repeated. Yes, please. Don't discuss the financial situation. It's no one's business. Let people believe what they want. He's under so much stress. Judith, I said carefully, you mean you want me to hide the truth so he doesn't look insecure? She hesitated. That's one way of putting it. I looked out the window at the quiet street below. I'm done pretending for anyone's comfort. Her voice hardened. If you cared about him, you'd protect him. I did, I said, but protection isn't the same as enabling. There was silence on the other end. Then a clipped, "Goodbye, Alicia," before she hung up. Later that week, a mutual friend called to warn me that Ethan was telling people I'd used him, that I'd set him up. For a moment, I almost laughed. The irony was too rich. He had wanted to appear as the strong one, the provider, the man with control. But when that illusion cracked, he couldn't stand the reflection staring back at him. So he rewrote the narrative. He wasn't exposed. He was betrayed. Let him have that comfort, I thought. Let him build his armor out of falsehoods. I went back to work, my real work, consulting for tech integration, managing my software contracts, mentoring small startup owners. And as my focus shifted, so did my peace. The apartment felt quieter, lighter, as if it too had been holding its breath. One evening, I attended a networking event for medical tech. I didn't want to go, but a client insisted. That's where I met Dr. Grayson Miles, an ER doctor with the kind of grounded calm you only find in people who spend their lives around chaos. We started talking about workflow systems in hospitals, about burnout, about what balance even means anymore. It was easy, effortless even. When I mentioned my background in software, he smiled. Ah, so you're the brains behind half the apps I use. Maybe, I said amused. Do they work? Mostly, except the ones that crash mid-shift, he teased. We ended up grabbing coffee after the event. The conversation stretched until the cafe closed. For once, I didn't feel the need to minimize myself. I didn't hide numbers or downplay achievements. I told him about my business, my past, even my engagement, the messy parts included. When I mentioned the prenup story, I braced for the same awkward silence most people gave me. Instead, Grayson chuckled lightly. That's actually kind of brilliant. I blinked. Brilliant? Yeah, he said. You protected yourself without destroying anyone. You didn't humiliate him. He humiliated himself. There's a difference. I tilted my head, smiling faintly. You don't think it's cold? No, he said simply. It's honest. When the check came, he didn't hesitate. He slid it toward me and asked, "Split it?" I laughed. Sure. It was the first time in months I'd felt that easy kind of warmth, the kind that didn't come with strings or calculations. A few months later, I heard through mutual circles that Ethan's marketing firm had lost several major clients. Apparently, investors had pulled out after learning about internal credibility issues. Pride can't survive in transparency. It's allergic to it. Someone asked if I felt vindicated. I didn't. The truth is, I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. And peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just quietly replaces everything you thought you wanted. That night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and my laptop open. I scrolled through the old prenup draft, the one Ethan had pushed so hard for. Then I looked at Eleanor's version, the one that leveled the playing field. 2 documents, 2 stories. One built on fear, one built on truth. I closed both and whispered to myself. He wanted a prenup to protect his future. I signed one to protect my peace. And for the first time in a long time, I meant it.